Good morning. Welcome back to East Asian International Management. This is the class that we are talking about Korean and Japanese management. Because it is October 26th, the university has a 2-week midterm exam period. So we are going to focus mostly on the details for Japanese and Korean management based off of the videos that we've had before. So I'm going to be going through this, and at any time people can post some questions. Make sure that you understand that each week you need to share with the class your research findings, your research results. Week 8 and week 9, which is what we're talking about now, that time should be focused on surveying people, surveying participants, surveying potential customers that you're focused on, because our research papers should relate to East Asian management, management in Vietnam, management in China. We've already covered China, management in Korea or Japan, and relate to a company replicating an existing journal article. So many people are using this week to survey and contact the companies that you have already researched a lot of reliable journal articles, and you can share some of those details and start getting into your surveys. So with that said, I won't delay anymore. I'm going to make sure that you guys see these details.
As Career Orientation and Quality of Life by a Canadian researcher from McGill University, Nancy Adler. You should be aware of Paul, understanding that he classified people around the world just according to high context and low context. Buckward and Strodbeck, what he classified the world as. Trumpenar, how he classified different management styles around the world. Schwartz and the Globe Project, all of these can be at the final exam. We talked about the art of war and many different features of the art of war, how that's important. We talked, these are some of the details of art of war. And now we're getting into Korean and Japanese management. Obviously, we're based in Korea. We should know more about the Korean management than any other type of management in the world. Many of you have been in Japan. Some of you might be from Japan. So you should have more of an understanding of this than anything. Please make sure you know the basics. Please make sure you understand how things are changing incredibly fast. For example, most of the world knows Japan grew really, really fast, and they introduced Toyota into the North American market and globally. And that concept of making a whole new product changed the world. Previously, General Motors and Ford, they made big, expensive cars. Giant GM trucks, giant Ford trucks, the giant Cadillac luxury vehicles. And there were very giant price tags on each of those. And the world thought, at least in North America, the parochial view was the world in North America thought that was the best you could get, that was normal, that was all you could do. Then out of nowhere, Japan started to provide their new cars, which were high quality at low price everywhere in the world. And so these high-priced North American cars had to drop in significant price to match what the Japanese were doing. Some studies were saying, for example, when GM and Ford started making cars, it took them on average, even though they had billion-dollar buildings making these cars and many, many workers making these cars, it took on average 60 days to make each car. 60 days of billion-dollar buildings and equipment and many, many workers working in this. Then all of a sudden, Japan came around and they made the cars, which are basically half price or a lot cheaper and more reliable, higher quality in 2 days. So North American management style was 60 days. Japan did it in 2 days. So that's one of the things we're looking at. And the world with management theories, they were saying, how is this possible? And they realized that the Japanese inventory system, the Japanese distribution system was very, very important. And then we started to realize how not just the just-in-time or the Japanese inventory system, but the idea of the Japanese went following a Z format, but it's generally going this way from the bottom, then it's going up to the top, to the CEO. So the management theories of the Z management theories are showing that everybody has input in management in Japan. But they show that since everybody is working like this, it goes very, very slow. And they were saying that Japan, because of this good thing, but it's really, really slow, that's why Japan basically died in the 1990s. And they didn't really develop since then. What are your comments when somebody says Japan died in the 1990s? What should you know about management? What should you know about the world? What should you know about general operations? Has Japan died? The video can't hear this. I know in Korea, the uncertainty avoidance to talk is one thing, but you have to learn the international management style. So please communicate. As Hall says, overcome the high context, low context. Maybe people are saying that they're taking too much time, and so they basically stop. They have started to grow quite well recently. Things are growing quite well. Make sure you're aware of these things. And a big reason, with big consideration with differences in management, is while North American managers supposedly are praising the best management in North America is these big public corporations where anybody can invest in them. You're on the stock market. You have these professional CEOs going in there, and the professional CEOs are supposed to be listening to the investors in what you're doing and the board of directors. People realize that that seems good, and it might be good on paper, but there are flaws with that system also. For example, these CEOs, yes, they have the investors that give them the money, like Apple has billions and billions of dollars that people pay to own the company, but it has almost no impact on the management. It doesn't really impact even the CEO's salary. Laws state that the CEOs in North America have to allow the investors to vote on key management decisions, like the CEO's pay, over $1 million a year. But unfortunately, the loopholes in the law are special in that the CEO can say, yes, you can vote. This is going to be my salary that I'm proposing. We can vote on it. That's the law. But the law does not say the CEO has to listen to you. So you go ahead and vote, but I'm taking that CEO pay anyway. Same thing with the operations. And then you say, well, the investors, they are basically represented by the board of director advisors that control me and hire me. However, who actually hires those board of directors? The CEO. And those CEOs many times pick people that are friendly and cooperative to the CEO's interests. And so if I'm going to be paying them big salaries, they're going to be taking the ideas that I give and saying, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. Alternatives, you can have proxy votes, but proxy votes rarely ever win. More importantly, they're saying that they're focused on the future. They're planning for the future. They're ready with the world's best technology is what they're saying. And they're going to have this great future. But what is the reality? The actual workers or the top executives in North America, they do still want to impress the investors to invest more because that's easy money. So they're trying to manage this quarter of the year, these 3 months or 4 months, just to impress the investors. So although they're saying they have long-term plans and they're managing for the long term in the future, they're generally just looking at the next quarter or maybe just this next year. Japan is very different. As it says here, there's less consideration of the shareholders. Japan, Korea, and China are more focused on the family. And it doesn't have to be by blood. In Japan, it's a very different sense of family. What is the difference between family in Korea and family in Japan and family in China? All related to business. What are those differences? You should know. Any comments? In Korea, the easiest answer is Korea. It's basically blood, just blood. And it's not just blood, it has to be pure Korean blood. A lot of families basically discourage a child marrying somebody from outside of Korea. And the people that have these big businesses usually try to give the business to their children. So it's just blood, blood, blood. And it's following the same name. In Japan, it's different. They've had a lot more access to the international movement of professionals and managers. So Japan is allowing these companies to take the world's best managers coming in. And if you are loyal, and if you're staying with the family for lifetimes, for example, and proving your quality, even though you're not my blood child, not my blood family, in Japan, you are considered the family. You're basically adopted just by showing your loyalty and your characteristics. In China, it's not just by coming from other areas and staying with me to manage. In China, family is also considered anybody from the geographic region where I came from. Anybody that has the guangxi with serious ties, whether it's the university ties, the school ties, the city ties, the high school ties, middle school, elementary school, all of those ties open the Chinese family to a broader range. Make sure you understand those details. It enables more focus, especially in Japan, on the long-term consequences, because we want the business to grow very well for our family, for our kids, and our grandkids. Versus in North America, it's less society-based, it's less group-oriented, it's less collectivist oriented, as we talked about here, and it's in North America, it's just the individual detail. That CEO is looking at the individual stock price that they can get, or the individual profit that they might be able to get. It's quite a bit different. And of course, after the war, things did change. Japan did several things that the world might not have approved of many, many years ago, back in the 1900 or during the Korean War. But with World War II and the Korean War, the United States military came over and basically took power out of Japanese control, where it was just the family ownership of businesses, and a few families controlled the whole countries. And they said that you have to diversify and allow ownership of the company to be spread out in many ways. Like a net or like a spider web. You have to have the ownership spread out. And they did that to satisfy the Americans, saying, do this. However, the reality is, although they spread out ownership, the ownership was going to another corporation that's in my name, and then another corporation that's in my name. And there's basically cross-shareholding. So I own the shares in this company that owns this company. And I own and control the shares in this company that owns this. So my interest in controlling this, plus my ability to invest and control this, plus my ability to invest and control this, and this all come together with the cross-shareholding in Korea and with the Chinese family and in the Japanese organizations, so that they can still control the management. Leadership and decision-making. Anybody want to comment on this, this system? Going once, going twice. Okay, there are some key features with the Japanese management style and the Korean management style. You guys are all aware of the Sanbei Hubei, the older, the younger person. There has to be a relationship. It's based on Confucianism. Basically, the older person has to take care of the younger person, and the younger person has to take care of the needs for the older person. There's a special relationship in Korea with those words we just identified, the senior and the junior. Same thing in Japan. They also have similar things that are related to that. With the ringi system, it impacts the decision making. They have the nemowashi, which is preparing the ground. There's a bunch of different processes that are important to understand. We're going to be talking about that soon. Overall, the culture environment is just like the Confucian system. It's based on harmony, the essence of Japanese life. You're not supposed to be arguing. You're supposed to be very, very polite. The decisions are made for friendly cooperation. A lot of non-Japanese going into Japan misunderstand when they're having the contract negotiations. Here's a contract for $1 million to buy your business. Everything okay? And you'll hear people saying, yes, yes, yes. So the contract's good? Yes, yes. Well, that's based on the harmony and the decisions, keeping the family happy, not making anybody feel bad. It doesn't mean, yes, we have a contract. It means, yes, I understand your question. And that goes in Korea, Japan, and China. Korea and China are moving more away from that. It's a little bit more global-minded than the Japanese strict adherence to face, but we need to understand that. There's informal surroundings of employees' ideas. There's the democratic method, which might take longer time. We have these features of the Japanese management style. Here we see the nemowashi is, would one of you like to read this first line, please? Okay. So that's what we're talking about here again. And sometimes you're encouraging people from throughout the organization in the bottom level to make suggestions to how to improve the quality or improve the management. And it's going back and forth. And there's so many people going through hundreds or thousands of employees that you basically remain anonymous. And the next key feature of the ringi system is the ringi seido. Ingyu, would you like to read this section? Yes. Okay, please make sure you're aware of these things. There is a negative side of it, and it's saying, for example, there's too many people and the sections get involved. There may be too many meetings. The idea that you have to be very, very polite and you shouldn't contradict your senior, you shouldn't argue too much with your senior, it might slow things down. A lot of people have been identifying those problems, especially since Japan slowed in the 1990s. This is just identifying negative features. Since this is an international English management textbook, There's going to be a lot of English views in here. A lot of English views will be coming from North America. So there's going to be a lot of comments that are negative, and these are some of the negative views, but they might not be entirely accurate. For example, a parochial North American view saying my way is good and this way is interesting, but there's a lot of problems with it, might be because they're not properly understood. So if we go back and we look at it, here's more of the actual definition, and it's saying some of these details. There are bottom-up levels, which it sounds like the North American management style. Anybody can make suggestions to the CEO in the Western world. In Japan, it sounds like that. But there are differences. For example, in the Western world, you'll have the big CEO here and lots of people here, directors, maybe one vice president, and you can have this guy making a suggestion right to the top. However, in Japan, you don't have that sense or that ability to go straight to the top because you're supposed to respect your hierarchy. And so all of these guys collectively, group-orientedly, they share these ideas amongst themselves. When they agree it's a good idea, then it goes to the next level, and the next level of managers will talk about it, discuss it, agree it's a good idea, and we might not even know where it came from. Maybe it came from this guy, but as a group, this guy in the Japanese and the Korean system usually don't put their name on it. They'll just give that proposal to their boss, and they'll put maybe their boss's name on it. And these guys will put their boss's name on it when they give it to them. So then it comes up to the top, and everybody, it's basically going up, but you don't know it's coming directly from this person. And with the
So related to that, I wanted to make sure you are aware of these details. Let me just make sure you're aware. This class is mostly based in Korea, and the Korean management system is very similar to the system that we were just discussing. We will discuss it more later, but the American management style, the European management style, the Canadian management style, which is where I'm from, they have more, as I just finished saying, the participative management. Anybody in the organization is usually hired for your skill, for your abilities, for your ideas. And if you have any ideas that you can contribute, you should be, and you have to be, sharing those in order to be recognized. You probably would not get any job at all if you did not proactively share your ideas. A lot of people recognize there's big differences in management between North America and East Asia. In East Asia, people are usually very quiet, very modest, group-oriented. If one person is not specifically leading the group, like in a class system, the class teacher will teach everything and say things, and most students do not say anything. They just sit and wait and learn and try to memorize details. In North America, since we have the equal-based system and we have decentralized information, people would only get a job opportunity, or they'd only get hired if they're promoting themselves so that they're recognized more than their peers around them. If you remain quiet, like standard practice in Korea or in East Asia, you probably will not get job opportunities with many international companies. You need to be able to show you're not just focused on following obediently and quietly. You need to show that you're able to add value. That's why our class uses the textbook and the class activities to develop research papers so that you can all, when you make this research paper, you are a specialist in that area and you can give that to a company to help them with something. So the paper is focused on a company. You need to be able to walk up to them and talk to them. That is one of the main focuses in the middle of the class, the midterm period. Students should use the first several sessions of class to learn the basics and learn from each class, each session, research articles from experts around the world, identify what the experts are saying, and learn a few of those details, learn some of the tables that are interesting or some of the quotes that are interesting. And then by midterm period, you have so much information that you are no longer just inexperienced and a following young student. You can share what these world experts are saying, or the best practices, the benchmarking practices are doing, benchmarking. So make sure you stop just following and start promoting yourself, start bragging, start being able to show while you're doing things, while a company is doing things in a certain way, they may want to consider ABC because ABC is different. And at least in this case, in this other case, they're getting better results. So don't just wait quietly and be careful. Don't say, you're bad, you're making a mistake, you are only doing it the Korean way, it's better to do it another way. That's insulting somebody. You need to recognize that everybody usually likes to be complimented. They like to feel good. And in Korea, it is illegal to make anybody look bad or harm their image. That's called defamation. You can go to jail for 7 years by saying this other company is better than you. You are terrible at this. They're better at it. You can't say Coke is better than Pepsi or Pepsi is better than Coke. That could harm somebody's image and they could sue you. So you need to focus on what is the polite East Asian or international management communication styles, which is focus on your solutions. Identify that you're a great company, you're doing things amazingly well. I would love to be able to work with your organization, and to show that I might be able to help, I've identified some of these other benchmarking practices. Company ABC in these other 3 other countries, they're doing it this way and it's getting better results this way. They're doing it this way and it's getting a lot faster return on investment. They're getting it this way and customers are going crazy. They love it. So we might want to replicate or learn from some of those in order to be able to continue growing quickly. So that is a way to show your details with participative management. When you are working with international companies, be aware that the culture you're dealing with, the communication styles you're dealing with are very important. And usually international managers or the directors or the top executives, they would want somebody that can help make the organization better. So with that said, let's go back and continue talking about these details.
Management differences, these guys know different things than these guys, and so these managers reshape that question with different words. Maybe it's more sophisticated words or more higher level management words, and these top level of managers will do the same. And so these guys might speak a whole different type of language, not a country language, just like a dialect that the CEO does. The CEO is such a high level, such technology, such sophisticated details that these comments generally have to be translated by the time they get up here, and they're translated as they go through each level of management. The Shinge Shiseido, what this is talking about is it's similar in the sense that lower levels can initiate these proposals, and it reduces the danger of decision being manipulated by certain individuals by going back and forth. It's generally saying that all of these things are going through the group, not just from the bottom level up. So everybody is agreeing and having impact on these things. And a big thing to think about is the family again, family concept, family concept, family concept. You're not just looking at your family, your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister. Your country, your society, your whole community is the family in many senses. And so there's many people involved. Many unnecessary questions and suggestions, inefficient way of time managing, delaying the business. These are popularly discussed Western concepts. So what are some of the US career perceptions and the Japanese perceptions? In Japan, another thing is you'll have the ultimate goal. You can move back and forth here. You can go from this department to this department to this department, and if you get a promotion, you can still go back and forth in these departments. By the time you get up here, you should have been able to work with almost all of these other departments, and you have experience and understanding of the whole business in many ways. And in Chinese government operations, it might be the same. A lot of powerful government officers or powerful managers, especially for state-run enterprises, they've had to prove they've done all of these different things. For example, they've worked in these various departments inside cities, and then they move from one small city to a bigger city, managing bigger projects and different types of projects. And only after they've proved those capabilities, then they can get into the federal levels or the top levels of state-owned enterprise management. So it's the broad experience, definitely in Japan versus in North America. It's a specialist. One individual can make your contribution, and you can talk directly with the CEO and develop a special project for that. This seems to be one reason why the Western world is outsourcing more individual jobs than East Asia. In East Asia, you don't hear of too many Korean companies, you don't hear of too many Japanese companies or Chinese companies, where inside the company, they will take a job and give it to some other expert to do just in 1 hour or 1 day.
Not yet. Anyway, make sure that you're aware that this system of outsourcing is increasingly being adopted all around the world, especially now, October 2020, with the growth of coronavirus and the growth of online work. People don't need to work face-to-face in an office with somebody else. If you can get somebody to do the job online, then you don't need to restrict yourself to just the people around you. You can hire anybody in the world. There's people in India that speak English, and there's people in Kenya that speak English at a much lower price. People in Nepal speak English even at a much lower price. So you can get people, as long as they do have those skills, they're able to contribute to your organization. And so increasingly, you as a 2020 student, you should be aware of outsourcing. And the idea of lifetime employment that we'll talk about later is becoming more rare. You should start thinking about how you can do a job for any company in the world, how you can provide some value added, and start sharing that. That is one of the reasons why we video the class. It's one of the reasons why everybody here is supposed to be doing a term paper to develop your specialization. So start selling that, not just to one employer, but to many employers around the world.
Versus North America, a lot of people with this future management are outsourcing the jobs through ELAMs or freelancer or online workers for very, very low pay just to get the job done. So they'll have more specialists and more outsourcing in the United States. That is starting to change the world quickly. There's increased mobility. Is there a lot of mobility in Japan, Korea, or China? Why would there not be increased mobility? Or, more importantly, what does it mean, increased mobility? Exactly, people can change their jobs. So having high mobility, is that good or bad? It depends on the cultural difference. In Japan, for example, mobility from inside this company, this is all one giant building, versus North America has a different building. You can move from this department with mobility, you're mobile to go to another department, or a partnering company, like you know that the Korean conglomerates and the Japanese conglomerates or the Chinese state-owned enterprises, they're huge organizations that have many partnering companies or subsidiaries, and you can go back and forth to those. But it's all inside the company. So it's loyal, versus here, it's not loyalty. It's just based on the individual expertise that you have. So you can go from here to another company to a higher position, and then you go to another company to a higher position, and then you go to another company to a higher position. This is the East Asian way versus the Western way. This is based on the loyalty, but the loyalty has been changing. As I said, almost everybody knows Confucian values, there's nothing more important than the family, than the filial piety. So you're supposed to respect your father, your mother, you're supposed to be very, very loyal to them. And it's incredibly important. You're going to continue to have that, especially where in China, they only have one child. So of course, there's only a very, very tight family, versus North America, you might have 5 kids or many kids. So this idea is important, but it is changing because he can go to North America for an education or work experience, get the training, and then he comes back. And he knows loyalty is very important, but he also knows smart is smart, reasonable is reasonable. And if I have to get somebody to come in and work under me, I will continue to own and control the final decisions, but we can have professional managers getting the job done as best possible. So that's what we're talking about here. Increased mobility in the United States is, it means going to other companies back and forth, versus seniority-based promotion in Japan. You do have mobility inside departments, and to get here, how do you get here? You can transfer departments almost any time, but how do you get to the next level? Yes, yes, definitely helps. It always helps to have connections. You're supposed to be living in a great world where they're just looking at the merits and stuff, but that's not always true. Sometimes you can have somebody that's very, very well qualified that's psycho, so you want to resort to the loyalty of family because family should never let you down. Not always, but yes. You had a question? Okay. Anyway, so to get from here to here, 1G helps, but it's not the main answer. Yes. Time, right. The idea of time. You have to put in the years. After so many years, you get a promotion. Everybody gets the chance for a promotion. And then after so many more years, everybody here gets the chance for promotion. But just the top move up. What happens to the freaks? What happens to the guys that make problems? What happens to the guy that has the psycho work problems? These guys go to the partnering branches in the remote islands, Tokto Islands, or like the North Americans, they'll be sent to work for the franchises in Alaska, for example. They'll still be loyal with the family in Japan, but they're going to be not taking the top roles here. They're sent to some other place. Lifelong employment is still very, very powerful. It's a huge concept in North America. That's why with these management theories, what is this theory? If I just show you this diagram and ask, what is this management theory? You should know. What is this? Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is based on the Western views, and in Japan, some people say that the very top is not self-actualization, not self, individual. It's more of the group-oriented. So it would be more related to safety. Safety might be more of a concern over there. So the seniority, the lifelong employment, that is one of the top goals. Versus North America, again, as I said, with the outsourcing, you'll have short-term employment possible. Promotions just on merit. And some people say, by the time you guys are getting very, very serious into work, or your children's generation, some people say the average length of your job, your lifetime job, whereas now in Japan, the lifetime job is maybe 30, 40 years. But by the time, in another 10, 20, 30 years, some people say that lifetime is going to be.
I hope you guys think carefully about what we're talking about right here. This idea of what is the lifetime employment that you guys may want to expect. Maybe we can go into breakout groups for a little while and discuss this. What do you think a normal person like you, or the person sitting next to you, or the person screen next to you with online classes in the Zoom, how long will a contract last? As we said, maybe in Japan, it's 30, 40 years. It's lifetime employment, traditionally. But is that changing? We can talk about that for a little while. And then once we've finished the group activities, we'll come back to this. So, okay, I'm going to pause now, go into the breakout rooms. Okay, we're back from the group activity, and yes, it's great that you guys were able to identify employment opportunities because we are working more online, because we can do more outsourcing, because you can hire somebody from anywhere in the world, the other side of the world, many times for half price or a small fraction of the cost of hiring somebody in a developed country. That outsourcing is becoming more popular, and you're outsourcing now just for an individual project, just for an individual task. So some people are starting to see that you should develop yourself by the hour. Think of yourself as a lawyer. Think of yourself as a doctor. When you work 1 hour, you're paid a couple $100. When you work for a old-fashioned company, soon as you get the interview, you get in, and then you get paid every month for the rest of your life. Many people say that's going to disappear. So make sure you start taking advantage of these class opportunities to develop a paper, develop your specialization, develop your expertise, develop a way to help a company do something now, and continue to do that. Not only try to get a job with one great employer, but maybe have a hobby and consult some other organization at the same time. Be protected. Protect yourself so that if your dream employer lays people off because of something like coronavirus, you are able to keep getting income from organizations that you've been consulting with.
2 hours. The average length of work experience for everybody in the world might be 2 hours. And that means there's going to be more and more outsourcing. You You just get the individual job done by some expert, and you learn to manage those differences. So, for example, in Japan, if you're successful after 10 years, you get promoted to the Keicho. And after 20 years, you might get up to the Bucho. Or in Japan, what's that called? You have the Sajanen, Bujanen, right? Make sure that you're aware of those details. There's the manager, there's the director, there's the president. All of those are important to understand. And here's what we're talking about. The Kacho, Bucho, Sacho. Again, this is similar to the Sajanen in Korea. And here are the numbers where it's talking about it. Huijang, Sajang, all of these numbers. The Sawan right at the very beginning to the, and you can see these differences. Make sure you understand it, again, because when you're trying to get your job, the higher the connections you have, the more valuable they are at bringing you in. And if you are able to understand, for example, when you're doing your research project, you should be doing most of your research, or when you're managing your business, you start with getting the information down here, because they do the real work. They know what's really going on. So you can find the real facts in Japan, in China, and in Korea. You should be doing your research projects and your management starting here. But after you find this information, then you move up a level, and you make sure it's approved there. And then you make sure that everything is approved, and you can move up a level. That is a great way to work with the loyalty-based system. And it also allows, if you have a problem down here, you can still try to go to the top and go direct with the good valuable information, knowing that this might not work with some people. So, lifetime employment. Most employees in the system are directly recruited from school. Same in Korea, right? When are big companies recruiting in Korea? What is the month that you can get a job in Korea? Most jobs in Korea have recruiting when? Yes. What time of year? When is the job applications? Right. Generally, it's once or twice a year, and it's in some ways aligned around the university graduations. So you graduate, and then you'll have some time off, and then you'll start your job. And so the companies work with that. It's a whole community-based. You get your jobs that way. North America is very different. How do you get jobs, or when do you get jobs in North America? In North America, usually you get jobs by being able to apply anytime, having the guangxi to know when these jobs have openings, or having the guangxi and the connections, knowing what these projects are working on, what they're doing. And as soon as you know, for example, this guy is sick, you can volunteer to come in and help while they're sick. And if they like your abilities, you might be able to stay on. So it can be any time of year. And there's recruiting whenever there's a job that's needed. Make sure that you understand lifelong job security is very, very important. There's the focus on the abilities and the potential of employees more than just that one person's high IQ. For example, when you go in and you're recruiting at university, when you're recruiting from universities in Korea, Japan, and China, a lot of East Asian companies will hire you for your intellect, for your ability to think well, for your ability to act well, more than your ability to know that detail. Sorry, that might be confusing. You need to be able to know things. You need to be able to learn things. You need to be able to do things, but you can get hired without knowing it. Because they are checking for your ability to learn, and then they will train you. The training programs in East Asia are super long compared to training programs in North America, where they just give you, I interview you, the interview might last several weeks or months in North America, but after the interview goes well, here's the company training program, read this, you start work next Monday, and you have to go in and start doing the job from the very first day. Versus Japan and Korea, you're interviewed because you can walk and talk, and you know how to think, you know how to do things, you've proven you have the right talents, and then you're brought into the company and trained. Sometimes those training programs last a very, very long time. Negative side of Japanese lifetime employment, having a much harder time to find a new job. What would be a problem with students? Would you like to work for Sony? Would you like to work for Toyota? It might be great, but one thing you must consider, before you get that job, you should travel first. Because they won't be very happy if you work for a while and then take a couple months off to travel, because they're not going to keep the job. You have been disloyal. You left the family, they're going to fill that job, so you can't get in as easily. So a lot of people, they will travel after the university or during university, because as soon as you get the job, you stay with the company. And a big difference between the Japanese workers and Korean workers is Korean workers still think it's good to travel as much as possible. Even after university, I get a job, the more I travel, the more a Korean person thinks my boss is going to think I'm good, because I have this travel experience. I have the ability to understand how they do things in Czech Republic or the Middle East or North America. Versus Japan, Japanese managers are a little more loyalty-based, focused inside Japan, and if you leave, your job may disappear. So, layoffs in Japan, since layoffs are going to be a lot more infrequent, definitely a lot more infrequent than in North America. There's a trade-off with opportunities, layoffs, and security because of that concept with the culture. For security, generations are going to make big differences. You understand also that some of Japanese top companies now, for example, are being managed by non-Japanese. Some of the world's best Japanese companies do not have CEOs that are Japanese. There are companies that have a top person that was maybe born in Brazil, trained in London, England, with Portuguese parents, for example. Make sure you understand that idea. Japan is starting to change quite quickly. But senior promotions are still a huge part of it. The natural entitlement promotion during a long period of service, its merit is based on number of years, less than just your talent. Motivation for employees to stay long in one company, just like in Korea. How does a professor get from being a regular professor, a new professor, to the top against a university? Generally, the only way, even if you are an Einstein, even if you're publishing some amazing results, is generally through time. You have to show that you're loyal to your organization. However, if you are very, very talented in Japan or Korea and China, they will be taking care of you very, very well. Negative sides of promotions, of the seniority-based promotions. Of course, it's slower for some people. Of course, it's burdensome as seniority grows because you are supposed to take care of more people. You have to not only do your job, you have to be responsible like a father to the people underneath you. Slow economic growth may be a consideration. Another aspect of seniority-based promotions is there may be less innovation. If you have that generation requiring people to get to the top executive levels, that older generation might not have the new ideas of the younger generation. So the innovativeness might be stifled a little bit. Compensation. Employees at a Japanese company share more equally in cash than in the West. The bonus-based system. Does anybody know of what is an example of a bonus in Korea or Japan? For example, if I'm working for a company and I get a bonus, when do you usually get a bonus in Korea? Or if you get a bonus in Korea or Japan, how much is that bonus? Does anybody know? Usually it's at the end of the year, right? And the bonus value is generally what? Right. It's a percentage, or it's a value times the number of your monthly pay. It's not directly related to the company profit. In North America, the company profit determines a lot of the bonuses. Versus in Korea and Japan, generally they'll just give you not just a 1 month pay bonus, but they might give you 18 months worth of pay as a bonus. The biggest companies, the best companies usually do that. The standard monthly pay is considered very small. But if you're a genius and you're working very, very hard, you might get a bigger bonus than the guy next to you. And you might get your monthly pay at the end of the year with 18 extra months of bonus pay, while the other guy only gets 10 months of bonus pay. Those are some of the differences. So how can you plan to deal with this? I sincerely hope you guys, I'm going to talk about planning for a little while, then we'll take a short break, but I sincerely hope you guys understand you need to start planning to work with the system. You need to start planning to work with all of this immediately. So start thinking, what is your long-term plan, whether it's the 20-year plan or a 10-year plan, and then find out what you need to do in half of that time to get to your final goal, and then what you need to do in half of that time to get to your final goal, and what you need to do in half of that time to get to your final goal. I think you've heard this before. And make sure you start getting those final goals, or we're moving towards those final goals, one step done each day or each week, so you do get there. And of course, every day, you're going to have small problems. You have to go meet a friend at a coffee shop because they're crying for some reason, or you have to go pick up your dry cleaning, or you have to go take your child for immunizations, or whatever it's going to be. There's a lot of small tasks that you need to plan for each day that will get in the way of your long-term plan. So you must be able to plan for this. And there's certain things that you must avoid. At the bottom of this table, you must avoid these things. Avoid these interruptions, some phone calls, some of the mail, some meetings. Some people will say it's important, but you will need to learn how to avoid that. For example, the busy work, junk mail, some of these phone calls, time wasters. Avoid those. Learn to say no. Or if you're too nice, or if you're like the Japanese, very, very polite, you don't want to say no, learn to say, yes, sure, I'll help you do that as soon as the top things are managed and I finish those things I must focus on. So the areas that you have to focus on are most important. So you manage a crisis, you manage a medical emergency, you manage these pressing problems, deadline-driven things like your student essays, like your job applications, like your medical checkups or medical problems. But in general, big, long projects you know about for a long time, they're not supposed to be urgent. So you focus on planning for the future and what is creating value. This focuses on, this simplifies the table, understand what is important and urgent, and never do things that are not important, period. Playing is important. Sleeping is important. Having fun with your friends is important. If you don't do that, you will go crazy. So you have to plan time to have fun and party and be with your friends and sleep and exercise. So put time into Q1. But of course, you must also plan for your long-term goals and how you're going to be getting that job or developing your business. The Q2 over here says what is important and urgent. Those are accidents that you can't plan for. Those are accidents you don't know are going to happen, like a fire or a car accident. Yes, it's important. Yes, it's urgent, and you have to take care of it, but you're not planning to do those things. Anything that's not important, you learn to say no, or you will only do it after these other things are finished. So let's take a short break, no more than a 3-minute break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk more about this stuff. We just had a break. We're talking about Korean and Japanese management. We've been talking about how Japanese management is very focused on planning and very focused on their image. They'll have the long-range strategy, the short-range strategy, the medium-range planning that we've been talking about. All of that impacts the performance of firms. Not just the long-range and short-term planning, but because everybody is involved in the Japanese planning, everybody can make suggestions to the CEO, and the CEO listens to every other person in Japan. Some people say it slows down the Japanese economy. Is that true? Has Japan's economy always been growing fast? No. Any comments about that? There was a lost 2 decades. What exactly does that mean? When did the lost 2 decades generally start? In the 1990s, yes. What is generally happening? When did Japan really start to grow? Recently they started to grow, but a long time ago they started to grow when the car companies started to sell the cars to the whole world. And then they also started to grow when the Sony Walkman was starting to be provided to everybody around the world. What happened before Japan really started to grow? What was normal management? Normal management was the North American huge luxury cars for a huge price. That was the only thing you could have. Japan came out with new lower levels of technology, but everybody could buy it. And since that's the East Asian management style, selling many, many products for low profit, that's definitely a Chinese characteristic, right? You sell many products for low profit versus the Western style, you sell a few products for high profit. So when Japan started to sell the cars, they had billions of possible customers. They grew really, really fast. Same thing with the technology with Sony. What was the Sony Walkman competing against? Before the Sony Walkman came, I don't even know if you were born yet. Boy, I'm getting old. But before the Sony Walkman came, what was the standard? What was Sony Walkman taking business away from? The old cassette tapes or the big plastic vinyl records, right? And those huge TVs and the huge radios. They had radios this big as this box, or as big as this box. And if you wanted to listen to music, you had to turn the radio on, which was this big just in your family living room. It sounded beautiful, but it was very, very expensive, like $2,000 easily for just the ugly radio. It's not even a TV, just a radio this big. And so the Sony Walkman came out, and it was small, smaller than this. And it would be for $100. And that changed the world. That management style, where you sell many, many products for a very, very low price, you're changing the world. You go from having 100 customers, or maybe in the West, you have 1,000 customers or 100,000 customers. But in that Eastern style, you're looking at all of society, all of the planet. You have billions of possible customers. So they're growing like crazy. So what happened? After everybody had the Japanese cars, and after everybody had these small Walkmans, there was not really much else to do. They didn't have these new technologies for quite a while. So Japan basically stopped. Since the Walkman, what is a new technology related to fun and entertainment? Video games, great. So since the Walkman in Japan, which changed the world, we had video games. What were some of the biggest video games? Generally, it was the Microsoft in North America, so that was growing for a while. They do have the Nintendo and the Wii system. That helped, but that's been one of the only big things that's come out of Japan in decades. So start thinking of this new type of technology, the new type of management products, and how it works with, in East Asia, they sell many, many, many for low price, versus in North America, you'll have a few sold for very high profit margins. That makes a big impact. And how does it change the world? You were saying when you had a couple of comments, what did you identify with this? Great, thanks. As we can see here, we see there's the, in 2000, there was a big dip. You guys know in 2000, it's famous for the .com area. Just before 2000, all companies were trying to grow really, really fast. And everybody thought Japan was the leading edge. .com is when we had the beginning of animation and a lot of the video games starting. So online business was growing really, really fast. But then in 2000, there were so many companies like Facebook and Twitter that has been just placed on the stock market in the last 48 hours and is growing like crazy, growing really, really huge, very, very fast. But at that time in the 2000s, people thought that was the best business in the world. Everybody started to make a new business. But what's the reality? Anybody could make a website, which means anybody could make a business, which means almost everybody did. And people thought since you had a website and it sounds kind of cool, people were investing in the stock market for you with lots and lots of money. But then very quickly in 2000, they realized, well, that was kind of stupid. He's just a young guy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And the business didn't really work. So all of these companies crashed. There was the .com. Recently, what we do see is there is a trend towards East Asian growth. And with East Asian growth, the United States is kind of afraid of the Chinese growth. They're going to be too big. Korea is a little bit small, so they're not really too afraid of Korea. So they've been promoting the Korean businesses, whether it's online or the Japanese businesses, to diversify against the big bully coming from China. That's the Western view by some people. So competitive advantages in the world markets. 1950s and 70s, there was the low-cost manufacturing, as we were talking about. There was the increase of wages. Japanese developed the comparative advantage. The Japanese companies had cutthroat domestic competition, strong international competitiveness. Generally, remember again that Japan was at the family style or the social community style of growth. So Japanese companies were paying people very, very low amounts, just as they were doing in China. Is that all you should think of? No, because versus in North America, where they pay you and they don't care about your health insurance, they don't care about your housing or your clothes. In China, for example, they have to give you housing, they have to give you uniform, and many of them still give these free workers lunch and things like that. Just like here, universities. Has anybody been to a university outside of Asia? A North American university? The cafeteria, the foods there are probably very expensive. Versus here, the foods are almost sold below cost because there's the government subsidies. Those are very big differences. And the pay is the same. When the low pay in Japan was used to grow the country, after the country became rich, everybody wanted the high pay, and as soon as you got the high pay, people sort of became lazy and a little more complacent, things slowed down. The exact same thing is happening in Korea. Korea in 1960s, 1965, what was the average pay? $100 a year was normal for everybody. What was the average pay in even the 1990s? Maybe $5,000 a year. And now what is the average pay? From the 1990s till now, it's grown incredibly fast. Many people are expecting at least $20,000 or $30,000 a year as average. And since you're getting rich, and since so many people in Japan and Korea got super rich with the high-tech .com companies, everybody has got a lot of money to spend, and so they're getting a little more relaxed, a little more comfortable, they're not working as hard, and the economies are starting to slow. Does that make sense? The more money you have, the more comforts you have, the less you have to torture yourself to work hard. I can't say when I was young, it doesn't really apply, but when regular professors in Korea were young, they had to study maths and engineering and sciences super, super hard. Do you have to study maths in Korea today? No. When did that new policy start? The idea that students no longer have to study maths hardcore is a very new policy. It's just started recently. Because the money, the wealth that everybody's had has been so good, they're starting to be more relaxed. Less on work, more on enjoyment, more on playing sports with young kids. So Korea's economy has been slowing a lot. Same with Japan. What's happening in China though? Do Chinese people worry about playing sports and soccer and baseball or swimming lessons for the young kids? Absolutely not. The country is still on average very poor. So the country, all workers in general, still have that burning desire to get the comfortable lifestyle, so they're working very, very hard, and maths and sciences are generally the safest, fastest, best thing to study to be prepared to grow. It's very, very nice to study Greek mythology. It's great to study the arts of some dying civilization, but those generally don't get you the jobs like maths and sciences and the management skills can get you. Make sure you understand that, so those competitive countries are using those desires and hard work to grow. China is still working hard, studying the most in the world. Up until a few years ago, Korea was working super hard, but now people are getting their parents to send them to these study schools, but then skipping the study schools to play video games, or talking in the study schools, the hard ones, with their friends. And that's some of the reason why Japan slowed down so much and Korea slowed down so much. Make sure you're aware of how those things work. The financial strategies. In the 1950s and 1990s, Japanese companies overwhelmed the competitors with their products. As we said, in reality, it represented only a group of Japanese companies in the same industry flocking to the same strategy. Anybody want to name some North American foods? North American food companies. If you start thinking about North American food companies, almost all North American food companies are controlled by maybe 10 companies or less. Coca-Cola owns many different drinks and foods. Pepsi owns many different drinks and foods. Kraft, General Mills. Other than that, you have Procter & Gamble and Unilever. Those companies are just a few companies controlling almost all of those popular products. Almost all of the products. So just like in Japan, a few companies grew the whole country. It depends what you're focused on. If you see, for example, in Africa, you'll have a lot of countries growing very, very fast with GDP. And so people say, congratulations, African countries, you're growing very, very fast. That's the place to invest. But if you look very, very closely, there's only one or two companies that are actually there. And they're oil and gas or mining companies. They go in and they might be taking this gas. And all that takes is one construction drill operator to put the drill in the ground and another person to take the pipe the gas out, and then it's taken to a different country. So that company makes billions and billions of dollars, but there's only a few workers. So that company gets a lot of sales, and it's going through the country, so the country has billions of dollars of growth, but only a few people people have benefited, exactly as you have identified in you. So with your management, it's good to understand that people talk about these big companies like Procter & Gamble or Sony or Toyota or Samsung and Hyundai, but most of the jobs are where? In all countries in the world. More than 90% of all jobs are in the small and medium-sized businesses. So it's best for you to plan to have your own businesses. And if you want to gain experience, you can gain experience in East Asian companies, but understand the concept and how it works back and forth.
With that said, I hope, again, you guys realize that with the most employment in the world is with the small and medium-sized businesses. And that usually starts from one individual person, just like you, the person that's studying next to you, the person that's studying in front of you or behind you. Those people are typical people that would start their own business. And going through our class activities, you are becoming a specialist. You are developing a research report, a consulting report. You can start selling that, developing your consulting company. And when you start providing that to your employer, the employer sees that you know about the business, you know about the company, you're able to provide some good information. You can start helping immediately. You could not only get one job for them, but you can do the same thing for many other places. So a lot of people, soon as they get that great job, soon as they finished working for the first 2 or 3 months, they settle down into employment opportunities, and then they realize that it's a huge, giant machine. The company works slowly. If you are super lucky, you have a manager that is always pushing you to develop and get more and more good things and rewarding you for those things. Many times people don't have great managers that don't reward you for doing extra, for going beyond the normal work requirements. So you can use a lot of the extra free time to start working for other companies. And increasingly, that should become important. You may be able to develop your consulting company. Odesk, Elance, there's hundreds of online companies that will take your abilities and share that with other employers.
Part of the Japanese system is JIT. What does JIT stand for?
Just in time.
Anybody want to explain it? Yes. Some people might not understand the details of that. I can simplify it. I love real estate. If you really want to have a very strong financial future, learn about real estate. Learn about how almost everybody in the world wants to get into the stock market.
Absolutely.
The hottest thing in the stock market right now is what? In the last 48 hours?
Cryptocurrency.
Twitter has now come on the stock market. Before Twitter, what was the most recent hot stock market story? Facebook. Facebook grew like crazy. It took university students like you guys and made them billionaires overnight. Twitter is doing the same thing. What is interesting about Twitter? Anybody know how Twitter is managed? Anybody know how much profit Twitter has? Excuse me. Twitter is getting something, they plan to get something like $10 billion with the stock. But they're already up, I think it's under $20 or $40 billion they've already got, and they haven't even finished that first round of IPO. What is interesting about Twitter? It's never made a profit. Ever. It's always making a loss. And yet going on to the stock market, they're making billions of dollars. So it's interesting for you guys to note that you guys have the potential to make business like that. You're plugged into that growth area in East Asia. You're plugged in with the culture, which is the Confucian culture, the East Asian loyalty-based culture. You're plugged in with the technology all the time. Make sure you take advantage of that, and you will be the new Rockefeller or the new Andrew Carnegie or the new Vanderbilts. Just like when they invented steel and they invented oil, you guys can invent those new futures here. So with real
make sure that you're aware that you have an incredible opportunity around you right now. Make sure that you're aware that since you were born with mobile phones, you were born with the internet, you were born with these apps around you all the time. I wasn't. We didn't have that when I was born. You have a lot more opportunities. And when I was young, when I was your age, we could not easily travel. It was incredibly hard to travel. You guys can travel anytime. And when I was born, we had a very hard time to learn things. We had to find good books, read good books, and that was generally the only way to learn. Now with the internet, you can learn things, watch videos as you're jogging, learning things. make sure that you're aware of that, how the things are changing, and use your time wisely. With that said, I'm going to stop the class here. We're going to continue. Next class, we will talk more about how you can use your time and your opportunities for developing your own business, developing your specialization by taking your class report and turning it into a consulting report to give to your favorite employer. So with that said, thank you. Have a good day. See you guys next class.